Hello and welcome to the second night of the 8th Annual Equine Industry Symposium, hosted by students at the University of Guelph in the Bachelor of Bioresource Management Equine Management program. My name is Molly Glave and I'll be your MC this evening. A reminder that the University of Guelph resides on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We recognize this gathering place where we work and learn is home to many past, present, and future First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. A special thanks to our sponsors, Sierra Insurance, Equine Guelph, Smart Cert, The Rider, Schleza Saddlery, Canadian Horse Journals, and KX Radio. The symposium wouldn't be possible without them and their wonderful support of this event. Congratulations to our prize winners from last night. The winner of last night's Schleza Saddle Fit gift certificate was Catherine Krowski, and the winner of the gift certificate towards the Smart Cert massage course is Julie Couture. Winners will be emailed by our team to receive their prize. Be sure to stick around until the end of the night, when another opportunity to win these prizes will be given. Please note that videos and microphones for all attendees have been disabled. Throughout the night, please feel free to ask questions in the chat. Chat monitors are available to answer general questions, or if it is a question for the presenter, they will be read aloud during the Q&A session. Please note that rude or offensive comments will not be tolerated. This is the 8th Annual Equine Industry Symposium. The Equine Industry Symposium was started in 2016 and aims to grow knowledge about horses and develop important relationships within the equine industry. Discussing industry issues without primary reference to any discipline is something in which all members of the industry must engage. The Equine Industry Symposium is hosted by Bachelor of Bioresource Management Equine Management students. The Bachelor of Bioresource Management program at the University of Guelph is the only one of its kind in Canada. It provides students with the opportunity to gain skills and experience from accomplished faculty experts, as well as hands-on experience. The equine management major includes courses such as equine event management. Students in this course organized and are hosting the Equine Industry Symposium. Last night kicked off this year's symposium. The theme for opening night was Bridging the Labor Gap. We had a wonderful presentation from Dr. Kendra Coulter on the current state of the industry, where she set the scene for the rest of the event. We also had a discussion panel where students and graduates from our various equine programs on the theme of looking forward, hosted by Akash Maharaj. Tonight, our focus is boosting business efficiency. We will be hearing from two wonderful guest speakers about what makes a successful business and what makes a business survive. First, we'll have a presentation from Joel Lalonde on successful business models. Next, we'll hear from Sean Jones. Sean will be giving a presentation on succession planning. After the presentations, there will be an open Q&A session for the audience to address their questions to the presenters. Without further ado, please allow me to introduce our first speaker, Joel Lalonde. Joel has been the president and CEO of Your Credit Union since 2013. Since June 2020, Joel has also been the owner of Winbrook Equestrian Center in Ottawa. This center has been focused on horse care and provides a welcoming environment for those interested in camp, lessons, and getting to spend time with horses. They have recently started a therapy program, which will allow those with physical and mental limitations to experience the joy of horses. Joel is all about strong purpose. He encourages those around him to think about why they're running a business and what they're trying to achieve. Joel also encourages those working in the business industry to surround themselves with the right people who align with their goals and values and who believe in the work. Today, Joel will be talking about successful business models and sharing his experience holding executive roles in both the business and equine worlds. Joel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Molly. Well, thank you first and foremost to the organizers for inviting me to speak tonight. It's an exciting agenda, and I'm looking forward to listening to Sean's presentation as well. Winbrook Equestrian Center. And as Molly indicated, I am fundamentally about the why which defines purpose, which defines motivation, and in many cases will drive you forward when things get a little rocky. So why would we buy Winbrook Equestrian Center? I am only a few years away from typical retirement age, and yet we've started a brand new adventure in buying a fairly large facility in East Ottawa. It's quite simple. Our daughter has been riding now for 10 years, and she let us know some 4 years ago that she'd like to do this professionally. At the time, we had leased a pony for her. She was 13, I guess, at the time. And she was taking a couple of lessons a week and doing some shows and so forth. And eventually that year won the provincial championships on that horse, or that pony, I should say. But we understood that that wasn't going to be enough, that if she was going to be successful as an equestrian professional, she needed a lot more opportunity to ride as often as she could, opportunity to ride different horses, opportunity to get coached by qualified and motivated individuals. And then finally, the opportunity to train and compete and eventually lead her own team. So we had a very strong why. So Winbrook Equestrian Center is a 100-acre farm. We currently have 30 horses on property, and we have a very strong riding school program. And as Molly mentioned, we've just launched a therapeutic program as well. We add to that a decent summer camp program, and we have a very small border and show team component as well. So that's Winbrook, and that's the answer to the question, why would we do that? All right, so on tonight's discussion, we're going to touch on 6 different topics. And my background is quite standard, Bachelor of Commerce, major in Finance and Accounting, a Master of Business Administration, 25 years now as an executive in the banking industry, last 10 years as CEO of a mid-sized credit union. And the framework I apply in my day job is very similar to the framework I've applied at Winbrook. And by the way, the pictures you're going to see tonight are either of my daughter or some of my family and some of our horses, of course. So we'll touch on all 6 of these. And of course, I look forward to questions, any questions you might have at the end of the session. All right, owner-operator in the service industry. So first and foremost, equestrian services or equestrian sport, equestrian training and riding are all part of the service industry. We're not selling a product, we are selling a service. And of course, when we sell a service, much like in banking, the main asset are people. People are how you deliver the service. People are how you connect and express the values that are important to you. People are how you truly deliver an experience, right? Excellence and care and so forth. So the owner-operator in this specific segment of the service industry is probably the most prominent business model. It's one where an ambitious equestrian athlete decides to pursue a career as a professional, as possibly a barn owner. And most of those that I see on a day-to-day basis, most of those individuals are owner-operators with either no team at all, right? So these individuals might have 5 or 10 horses. They might exclusively be a training and a show team facility. Then you have others that go a little further. They might have multiple programs like a riding school and so forth. And one of the challenges, of course, is as an owner-operator, it can be difficult to scale up. I would go so far to say that in some cases, the owner-operator model is essentially the creation of a job for that individual. Working for self, of course, but still not much more than just a job, and we'll get into that. So, of course, the owner-operator could be with or without barn ownership. We felt strongly that barn ownership provided a foundation that our daughter would need moving forward, giving her some protection over the years or decades, some sense of grounding, of foundation. So with the ownership, if one can afford it, if one can have the right partnership to getting it done, I think you can really have an impact, a greater impact, I would suggest, on the overall experience. You can obviously rent facilities, there are other solutions as well, but the ownership is a significant decision-making opportunity. All right, opportunity to truly impact quality of service. As the owner-operator, you are, of course, at the heart of the business, whether you are a sole employee of, or you have multiple employees, of course. People look at you and you have the ability to set the tone. It is challenged typically in limited business knowledge and ability to scale up. But it's not unlike many other professionals. I brought my car to the local mechanics, a really nice gentleman. We've known him for a few years now, and he's an owner-operator. He's got his own shop, he's got his own tools, and he runs his own business. He's excellent at what he does. So it's not unlike the owner-operator in the equestrian industry. All right, now let's get into the framework that I would describe as essential to the creation of a successful business. And this might sound somewhat theoretical, but I can assure you that 20 plus years of running businesses, very complex businesses in banking, as an example, requires this level of thinking, this level of strategic frameworks, this level of commitment. And to be successful in any business, I strongly believe that you need to be able to answer these questions. You need to be able to provide some context and some direction. And you need that sense of stability and sustainability that you can only get, again, in my opinion, with a strong sense of purpose and direction and strategic planning. So let's get into mission, vision, value proposition. So, of course, the mission is typically described as the purpose. What are you trying? Why do you exist? What is the general outcome you're trying to achieve? What is the foundational reason for your existence? Why do you exist? What is your purpose? So in our case, it's to provide our daughter with the opportunity to achieve her end goal, which is to become a professional in the horse industry. And we want her to have a very successful career. So we believe that having a home barn, a successful business in support of her journey is important for that success to happen. Then we get into the vision. So once we have clarity as to why would you purchase, why would you open a business, why would you start an operation, then the vision is what are you trying to achieve? And that achievement would have to be a clear representation, a clear testimony to the purpose itself. So in our case, the vision took a little longer, to be honest, for us to get clarity on. Simply because it's a new industry for us as a family. My wife, Lisa, and I are not horse people. We were dragged into this by our wonderful daughter. And so the vision for us is, I would express it as the connection between horse and child. And the metric we use is 10,000. So we want to achieve a connection between horse and child at a frequency of 10,000 per year. Another way of saying it, we want to touch 10,000 lives each and every year through Winbrook Equestrian Center. So when you break that down, that's essentially 200 connections per week. So of course you can ask, where are we on that? Well, we're about 2/3 of the way. Right now we're at, if we were to measure our level of activity, stretching towards this vision, we are at about 130 to 140 lessons or service solutions, if you'd like. So we're very happy with the progress. It's been a little over 3 years now, so we're happy with that. All right, value proposition. This is one that not as frequently used, and yet it's so important. The value proposition is, how would you translate your mission vision into a statement, into an expression that, if read by a client, would provide them with the context and the information that they would typically like to see in their decision-making process. So what's important to you? What are you trying to achieve and why? And how do you translate that mission vision into the service standards that you would like to stand by? One example in that for us here at Winbrook is that when we bought the facility, most to all, I should say, horses actually would get their daily turnout, of course, but they would all come back into the barn at the end of the day. And quite a few of them would be in standing stalls. And I'm sure you're all familiar with a standing stall. That is not the standard that we wanted for our horses. And so now all horses that we own that work the riding school program live outdoors 24/7. They get turned in when it's time to work. They live in paddocks. They have shelters. They have blankets. They have friends. And overall, they are much happier. So that is an expression of our value proposition that our customers can see on a regular basis. So that one is a very important one to us. All right, beliefs and values. So we've described the purpose, we've described the level of the strategic achievement that you're striving for, and how you would translate that for your customers. Now we talk about goalposts, if you'd like, beliefs and values. How would you like your customers to describe you and your business? What is important to you? What would you not sacrifice for a short-term result? What is something that you want your staff to live by, to share? And this is the soul of the business, is how I would describe it. Of course, in my day job, the cooperative sector is very strong in this area. The cooperative values are foundational to the existence of co-ops across the country, around the world. So in our little shop at Winbrook, horse care is first and foremost. A very high level feeding program has been established with nutritionists involved and so forth. Our staffing believe in that same value as well. We have a vet tech on staff. We've got amazing vet services and farrier services for our horses and our clients' horses. The standard of care for our horses is second to none, we think. We'd like to think anyway. And it is something we express to all of our clients. As we onboard new clients, we always start the same way, that the horse is at the top of our list of concerns. If they agree with the level of importance assigned to the horses, then we typically get along just perfectly. So on that, it for us in the horse industry, it can be relatively simple. And you would think that it would be in every area of the industry, but it's not. I'm sure you're all aware, as I am now, that there are behaviors out there that are short-term in thinking, that are focused on ribbons and other awards and prestige, and not always first and foremost on horse and their care and their level of performance, sustainable performance, might I add. So beliefs and values are foundational. You can't be successful in business long-term without a strong set of beliefs and values. And so I would really encourage you to not only be able to answer the question, why? Why would you start a business in the equestrian world? Why would you want to go down that path? What are you trying to achieve long-term? What impact are you trying to have on your community, on maybe even broader, on maybe even on your country if you're that ambitious? And then how are you going to express all of that? How are you going to live that on a day-to-day basis so that you feel that you're at the top of your game and you're doing it the right way? All right, so this is a picture of myself and my wife, Lisa, and my daughter, or our daughter, Emily. And what I would say about this slide is having that access to the core skills and knowledge and expertise that you will need as individuals to be successful is at the core of the magic formula. It's at the core of any successful business. If you go into any bookshop and go into any of the business book aisles, you'll see many books on success through people, success through strategy, success through skill and knowledge and so forth. There's a million ways of expressing that. But in our case, I'm the business individual. Again, 20 plus years, MBA, been running a fairly large and complex institution now for 20 years. My wife, Lisa, is a sales expert. She is the people person. She can connect with individuals. I remember back in the day when we first got together, she'd make friends. It seemed like every single day by taking the bus to work. It was just mind-blowing to me because I'm not like that. I'm more of an introvert, and she is 100% extrovert. So on that, we have a really nice balance. Our daughter is the horse expert. She's been a breathing horse, living horse now for over a decade. She only told us about 4 years ago that she wanted to do this professionally, but it seems like she's been tracking on that path now for about a decade. The intensity she brings to it, the desire and drive, has allowed her to gain amazing levels of knowledge on horse care, on riding techniques, on skill sets, and so forth. And now she has just recently started coaching within our riding school and is doing very well at delivering on all that knowledge. So we're very, very happy. So strategic outcomes. So essentially you do all that initial framework, and at some point that rubber has to hit the pavement. And the strategic outcomes are just a way of expressing the desire to achieve goals that are in line with your mission, your vision, and of course, live within your beliefs and your values. And they are the key performance indicator, confirming that you're making progress towards your vision. They might also provide the feedback you need to ensure that the execution of the business is within the guidelines of what you would describe as your beliefs and values. So the strategic outcomes are very important. So once you get into the why and answering all those questions, then you need to think of what do I need to achieve, strategically speaking, for your business over the next 3 years. So in our case, again, we're in that 3-year mark. When you purchase an asset as large as this equestrian facility, you have to structure the deal in a certain way to make it work. And usually that initial structure is not necessarily a long-term structure. So you need to restructure that at some point, and we're just closing on that process as we speak at the 3-year mark. And then along that journey, you need to achieve great clarity as to the direction and the strategic outcomes you're looking for. Those things don't necessarily happen overnight. They don't necessarily happen at the first day of operation, and that's okay. Sometimes you need to take a breath and get to know the business and the community and so forth, and who you are naturally attracting to your business model, and then challenge that process to make sure that the end result is what you would like to have happen. And then you take it from there. My last bullet on this screen is an advisory committee. As I mentioned a while ago, I think our little threesome here, our little family is well equipped to run this business and be successful. But certainly we have a full team behind us, right? We have 2 full-time staff at the barn. We have 4 part-time coaches. We've got professionals. We've got a tax accountant. We've got a bookkeeper. We've got, of course, the vets and the farriers and so forth, lawyers. So you need all of those people. And if you don't have the business expertise as you start your journey, I would highly encourage you to create an advisory committee for your business. And these are volunteer opportunities that some people would be happy to take on. And they might, with any luck, they might be the parent of a child that you're coaching and or providing lessons to or something to that effect. So then they'd have the double motivation of seeing you be successful. So that part, again, I think having the right people around you, people that you trust, people that would provide you with the right advice is so important to your success long term. Tactical plans. By the way, this is Clementine. I've been speaking about beliefs and values most of the night, it seems like, and Clemmy is part of that. Clemmy is going to a retirement home this weekend to meet with the local residents, and she does that on a regular basis. Not too long ago, she was at the CHIO school. CHIO is the local children's hospital here in Ottawa, and they have a school for children that need special attention and special support. And so Lisa and I, with Clementine, spent half a day there a couple of months ago. And it's spectacular, right? The giving back like that is so important. So tactical plans. So we get into actual doing here. So beyond the strategic outcome, which typically cover more than one fiscal year or one calendar year, you need to break it down. You need to look at actions and ambitions that can be measured within a period as short as 12 months. And they have to be diverse. I would suggest they need to be diverse in their focus. I mentioned sales, service, financial, purpose-driven. I just mentioned Clementine. We do those on a regular basis. We think it's important. It feels good to us, much like the launch of our therapeutic program. We only have 6 children in the program right now, but what we get back out of those 6 weekly lessons is just amazing. So we can't wait to get to 60, of course. So the KPIs from the tactical plans have to be in line with all of the previous discussions. And when you get to a certain level of sophistication, I guess, or granularity as we move forward through all of this, then you get into things like marketing plans and communication plans. So when we started, of course, we've got a Canadian corporation as the operator of this business. And we launched and we created, of course, a business name, Winbrook Riding School. We thought that was the appropriate term back when we started this, and because that was our initial focus. And now we find ourselves with a much broader ambition. So we've registered a second name, Winbrook Equestrian Center. And so, as you can tell, things can change over time, and that's absolutely okay. We'd like to describe that as agility. There's no way you will have all the required knowledge day one. And you have to show, of course, some sense of flexibility, agility, if you'd like, to be able to adapt to an ever-changing world and an ever-changing understanding of your place in that business world as well. So tactical plans, of course, are critically important. And you don't need 20 targets, by the way. If you had 6 to 8 really good targets that get you out of bed every morning and make you feel good when you measure the results at the end of the month, and feel that you can share that with your staff or with your colleagues or with your advisory committee, I think that's critical. This is where we spend most of our time as business managers, setting reasonable goals, creating the systems to make progress in those areas, and then measuring and adjusting, constantly trying to improve in hopes of achieving the overall ambition. All right, business efficiencies. So this is, I believe, my last slide. Business efficiencies, bluntly, really can only be discussed, in my humble opinion, when the entire framework has been in place, the framework that we've just gone through together. And we are now here at Winbrook looking at business efficiencies. We've identified just through the last few months significant efficiencies that are to be implemented in 2024. And this is where the financial benefit of business ownership starts making sense. At the end of the day, if you're going to be in the horse industry, you're likely to have to invest quite a bit of capital, whether it's for a horse or a farm in our case, both. So you're going to want to drive some financial success through all of that, through that investment of capital, but also of time. There's a lot of time to be invested in an equestrian-based business. So you're going to want to drive efficiencies. And when a business is efficient, not only does it provide better financial results, but it also attracts people that are focused on said process, on that same type of ambition. You want staff and you want colleagues and teammates and advisors that are driven by results and efficiencies, leading to a sustainable business model. At the end of the day, you do all of this to create sustainability. You do all of this to create a business that, of course, you can be proud of, that is achieving the vision that you set for yourself, that is very purpose-focused, that is truly having an impact on others, serving the communities that you live in. And all of that makes even more sense when the business is efficient, the business is profitable, and you can live a quality life as a result of, right? So, like every other industry out there, there is quite a bit of competition in the equestrian world. So it's not an easy process. It's not a simple process, and margins are relatively tight. So bringing a good financial skill set, accounting skill set to the business is important. And if you don't have that, please find yourself a really good and engaged bookkeeper. Find yourself a financial advisor that you trust, someone that can look at your financials, look at your results, and make suggestions. And find yourself a mentor. At the end of the day, mentors are great. I've always had mentors in my professional career, and since purchasing Winbrook, we've made really strong connections with a handful of farms, handful of families that have the same values as we do. And those are so helpful. They are essential to growing a successful business that you can be proud of, because you need that sense of support, that sense of peace of mind, if you'd like, that when you hit a roadblock, you've got people you can reach out to that you trust, and that will provide you with the guidance you're looking for. All right, my last little piece for my presentation tonight are the last 2 words on this slide: relentless pursuit. I use those words on a regular basis. It's almost like a self-speak to some extent. In business, you can have the framework that we just worked through. You can have all the right concepts and ideas and so forth. But if you don't have relentless pursuit, if you don't have determination, if you don't have that passion for it, then you might want to reconsider. You might want to start somewhere else. You might want to start as an employee and get to the level of comfort and the level of confidence that you need for relentless pursuit. Relentless pursuit is the chasing down of the ambition of business ownership, of service delivery, of excellence, of efficiencies. And it's a bumpy ride, but it is probably the most rewarding journey you could ever take. So I highly encourage, if you've got the appetite for this, please go for it. We need good people in the industry. There are lots of good people. We need more. We need qualified young people joining the industry and making an impact and growing it. We need educated young people joining the industry as well. People that understand that they come to the table with really good knowledge, and they understand the fact that they need other good people around them to be successful. And if you can bring that relentless pursuit, that level of commitment to your framework and your ambition, then you're very likely to be successful. On that, I thank you for your attention and look forward to answering any questions you might have a little later.
Thank you so much, Joel. That was a great presentation. Your notes on personal values, understanding of who you want to be and how you want your business to be perceived is so valuable. Your understanding on the importance of connection with clients is something we should all be aiming for. If anyone has any questions for Joel, feel free to put them in the chat and we will get to them during the Q&A session at the end. Next up is Sean Jones. Sean is an advisor at Sun Life and a graduate of the Agricultural Economics program at the University of Guelph. He is dedicated to helping those around him grow their business and recognizes the importance of maintaining a life-work balance. Sean understands the difficulty that can come with starting and running a business in the agricultural industry. Today, we will hear from Sean on succession planning and the theme of what makes a business survive. Take it away, Sean.
Thanks, Molly. Thanks, everyone at Guelph. Kind of excited about this. It's sort of a Guelph week for me. I got a call from some former roommates in Lambton. I spent my first year in Lambton at Guelph. I got a call from a few of them this week. We went for dinner, and it was sort of a reunion. It was really cool. And now I've got this. So there's this kind of a Guelph connection week. Joel, what a great presentation. And I loved your content. And I think as a former professional in the sport, had I known and really paid attention to all that kind of stuff early on in my career, I probably would have been a little bit more successful. I think it's very necessary, what you were talking about. And now it's just a matter of sort of putting that into practice in the industry. And my conversation tonight is on succession planning. So we're sort of taking that a little bit step further, going beyond just operational fundamentals, but what are we going to do for you as the business operator? So that's where we talk about succession planning. Equestrian professionals are not unlike normal Canadian business owners when it comes to their succession plans. There's a romantic idea that you create a business out of one of your passions, figure out how to monetize it enough to provide a nice lifestyle, and then eventually sell the business for a large sum when you're ready to retire to provide that retirement income. What differentiates most business owners from horse people is that most business owners have multiple mechanisms in place beyond just the intent to liquidate the assets of the business. These come in the form of RSPs, TFSAs, and various forms of tax-advantaged investment plans whose yield is not correlated to the performance of the business. Now, these are the two most important aspects of my discussion today. One, tax advantage, and two, the idea that your retirement and succession plan is somewhat decoupled from the performance of the business. You might have a slow month, but your succession and your retirement plan needs to continue to perform. So we're going to have that non-correlated yield. Now, the problem with many business owners is that they seldom discuss succession planning at the right time. So enter the plot twist. You need to plan your exit strategy at the inception of your business. It's a little bit counterintuitive. You're not really thinking about how am I going to get out of a business that I haven't even started yet. But I want to challenge your paradigm a little bit. So before we get into the content, let me tell you a little bit about me. I had the privilege of living out my childhood dream. I was a successful trainer in Wellington, Florida, had a barn full of horses, great clients, and horse shows on the nicest showgrounds in the world almost every single week. I've now since retired from that career path, as it wasn't exactly conducive to being a father of four, but I regret nothing from that wonderful chapter in my life, except for one thing: my lack of personal financial planning. And ironically, I would have loved to see something like what Joel was talking about back in the beginning of my career. But as a financially minded individual, I'm rather embarrassed about this, which created my crusade to help others to not make the same mistake. So as Molly mentioned, yeah, I went to Guelph. I was also certified by the Canadian Equestrian Federation at the time as a level 1 trainer. I was one of the first trainers to be certified by the United States Hunter Jumper Association when they launched that program. I operated my farm in Jupiter, Florida, just north of Wellington. We then got merged with the Palm Beach Riding Academy, which is a sister company to the Winter Equestrian Festival down in Wellington. So I spent the later part of my years teaching, riding, training, and competing on the WEF showgrounds constantly. It was really, really a cool experience. And I learned a lot from it. And some of it I want to be able to share with you tonight. First of all, legal disclaimer, this information provided in this seminar is of general nature and should not be construed as personal financial advice. Neither Sean Jones, Sun Life, or its affiliates guarantee the accuracy, completeness of any such information. The information should not be acted on without obtaining counsel from your professional advisors applicable to your particular set of facts. Now we got that out of the way. Like I said, my crusade or my goal is to inspire people to take action to enhance their financial well-being, whether they be horse-oriented people or not. And I do this by trying to help people learn about financial literacy, possessing the skills and knowledge on financial matters to confidently take effective action that best fulfills an individual's personal, family, and global community goals. So why aren't more horse people establishing good succession and retirement plans? Let's be honest, if they were, I would not be here to talk about it. So here comes the challenge. And I remember my wife used to tell me this all the time. We have so many draws on our money. And nowhere is this more applicable than in the horse business. There's a never-ending pull on your money in many different directions. There's always something that needs repair or upgrade. Every time money comes in, it goes back to the business and not to the business owner. I was talking to a friend of mine recently. He says, I want to install a new ring. And he realized that from an equity standpoint, there was virtually no return on investment. The new ring was not going to adequately or substantially increase the value of the property or his business. He just wanted a new ring. And I get it. As a rider, I always want a nice shiny ring. But the capital required to put the ring in would never be returned back to him in kind from the value of the business or the value of the property. Look, this happens all the time. Your frequent little infusions of capital don't substantially enhance the equity. And look, I did this a million times. Here's me on a very expensive horse that I sold to a client, made a hefty commission, income from that sale horse. Where did that go? It went to a brand new shiny truck. Okay. Did I need a shiny truck? No. It's a pretty truck. It was green. It was my barn colors at the time. I thought I made my competitors jealous driving it, pulling up in my brand new 6-horse trailer too. But I didn't really need it. Did any of that money go into my retirement funding? No. Or my succession plan? No. It went into stuff. It went into the business. It went into the new truck. It went into an adjustment on my wife's amateur owner hunter, hawk injections on the school horse, whatever it did. Went into fixing the fence. That's what we do. Every income coming in becomes an outgone into the business. So what I want to talk about is how do we take care of the business owner? So what I came up with is sort of a mechanical solution. It's a formula. I call it my SWAN formula, my sleep well at night formula. And it goes 70, 20, 10. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means operational costs are less than 70% of gross revenue. Operational emergency and growth account is funded by 20% of gross revenue. The remaining 10% of gross revenue is deployed to the future you. I'm going to explain this in detail. So first, cost of operations needs to be less than 70% of gross revenue. This has been a problem in the horse industry forever, as I just described, right? There's always a pull on your money. There's a couple ways we need to address this, because I know getting to that 70% number is going to be difficult. First, we have to start out with a budget. We have to determine what can be cut and what can be raised. So we've got to talk about some aggressive cost cutting. We also have to talk about some aggressive price increases. It still blows me away how cheap it is to get into this horse industry. My wife and I were just talking. It was $120 to get a facial the other day. She was talking about, I want to get a facial, $120. Yet you can still get a riding lesson for 50 or 60 bucks. It's ridiculous to me. So as a group, collectively, we have to start thinking about increasing our fees so that we can help get to the 70% ratio by lowering the costs as well. I'm a bit of an expert on this because I've been through this multiple times. So reach out if I can help with any of these. 20% to prevent emergencies. Dave Ramsey would call this the Murphy Repellent Fund, right? We all know Murphy, what can go wrong will go wrong. It's nice to be able to deal with what can go wrong with cash on hand. So ideally, we're taking 20% of that gross revenue. We're putting it into a fund. It's in a business account. It's not an investment. It's like insurance. It sits there in cash. Right now, you can get a money market account that's paying 3.5% or 5%, somewhere between there. So we'll keep it in a money market account. And what I want you to think about is, as an operations owner, take 3 months worth of operations and build that up in this account. Once you have that emergency fund threshold achieved, you can now start establishing an upgrade fund. So yeah, I need a new truck, or I need a new trailer, I want to buy new jumps, I need a new dressage ring, whatever. Once that emergency fund is funded, we can start establishing that sinking fund. Now, a sinking fund is simply this. I want to buy an $80,000 truck, but I don't have $80,000 in the account right now. How many months of saving X amount of dollars is it going to take to get to $80,000? So that way you buy that truck with cash further down the road, rather than using credit. We're not accustomed to using a sinking fund because credit is so easily available. But speaking of credit, we can also use this fund to accelerate your debt repayment using a debt snowball. I don't want to get into the debt snowball right now, but all it means is you just pay off the smallest debt first and get rid of that, and then apply that payment onto the next debt, onto the next debt, and so on and so forth. So you're eventually debt free, which is the ideal way to be. So create that sinking fund to pay for your upgrades rather than using credits. It may take a little longer. You may not be able to get the brand new shiny truck, but maybe the 2-year-old truck is just as good. Factor that into the equation. Now, this is what I really want to talk about. This is the future you will thank you. Okay, this is the 10% that's left over. And look, I discussed the 20 and the 70% in detail in the horse portal webinars that I did post-COVID. I also did some talks, or I did a discussion board on the Equine Business 101 board in the horse portal as well, where I posted my thoughts on how to increase rates and so on and so forth. So we talk in great detail about the 20 and the 70%. Here tonight, I want to talk about the 10%. And I want to focus on a few things. This is a long-term investment. It can carry a little more risk to achieve the yield, and it must be tax advantaged using an RSP TFSA and an IDF, what I refer to as an IDF. We're going to get to those in a minute. So this is what I talk to my non-horsey clients about. Does your financial plan have a 10-20-20 vision? What exactly is my 10-20-20 vision? Well, it leverages the 3 greatest economic benefits available to us: time, compound interest, and shelter from tax. Using those 3 components, that's the best way to build wealth. So if we go back to this slide here, where we talked about long-term investments, that's where we deal with time. Talk about you can carry a little more risk, that's where we talk about yield or interest, and then must be tax advantaged. That's our tax component. So time, compound interest, shelter from tax. We all know this fella. We've probably seen this a million times. Compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. I would argue that time, compound interest, and shelter from tax, especially in Canada and Ontario, is the 9th wonder of the world. So how does it work? Well, we talked about saving and investing 10% of the gross revenue from the operations. 80% goes into a TFSA RSP combination, depending on your marginal tax rate. 20% goes into the IDF. We'll talk about that. That is one of the most important parts of this component because that is the safe place. What I want to think about, and I want you to come away with, is that 20% of your investable assets need to go to a safe place. We're going to commit to this plan for 20 years, and then we're going to stop. Okay, let's take a step back. Let's talk about TFSA, because we talked about a lot of acronyms tonight. TFSA, one of the greatest wealth building tools available to Canada. I strongly encourage all Canadians to make a point of trying to max fund this every year. It's a tax-free savings account. It can be contributed by Canadian residents 18 years or older. Investments will grow tax-free and remain tax-free for life. Total accumulated contribution space available in 2023 is 88,000. You can put 6,500 per year in. That may be adjusted depending on political parties involved. Contributions are made with after-tax dollars, but do not provide a tax deduction. But the point is, whatever money you put into this can grow tax-free, and then therefore redeemed or pulled out at a later date tax-free. This will have an impact later on when I show you a real-world example. You've all heard of an RSP, Registered Retirement Savings Plan. Obviously, same thing as a TFSA, you can have many different types of investments in here. However, whatever is contributed into this account by you or on behalf of you reduces your taxable income for that year. Okay, so for example, let's say you had income of $100,000. You take 18,000 of that $100,000, you put it into an RSP. We've just reduced your taxable income down to 82,000. You only pay tax on $82,000 worth of income. That could equate to up to about $6,000 of savings here in Ontario. Now, in retirement, when you pull that money out, you are taxed on that. The idea is that, or the hope is that, you are at a lower marginal tax rate in retirement than you were in your contributing years. So therefore, it's a net gain to you. The third component is the IDF, what we refer to as an IDF, Insured Deposit Fund. It's actually a participating whole life insurance policy. These things have been around for 155 years in Canada and have never failed to make a profit. There's guarantees embedded in them because once they are vested, they can't lose money. So that's why I call this the safe place. You put 20% of your investable assets into a vehicle like this, the other 80% going into your RSPs and your TFSAs in a market-based portfolio can be a little bit more risk because you know you have this involved. Again, something like this is a good hedge against your equine investments, right? That horse that you just spent $1 gazillion on pulls a suspensory is suddenly worth not much anything anymore from a resale value. That can't happen to this. So it gives you that extra safety net in your financial plan. What's really cool about this program is that it can be used to enhance your retirement income in a tax-preferred manner. We'll get to that later. Let's talk about Jill. So real-world example, Jill is 35 years old, and she runs a lesson and boarding operation with a gross monthly revenue of $30,000. Now, Jill is following my SWAN plan, and 70% of that gross revenue is going to operational costs, which is equivalent to $21,000 per month. The emergency fund is being contributed to monthly at $6,000. That leaves $3,000 to go to the future Jill. Of that $3,000, 80% of that, or $2,400, is invested in a tax-preferred investment vehicle, i.e. the TFSA and RSP, depending on the marginal tax rate. Now, what I advise to clients is that on a monthly basis, we put money into the TFSA, and then come tax time in the new year prior to the RSP deadline, we look for the sweet spot and we pull money out of the TFSA to put into the RSP to get to that perfect zone of I don't owe anything to the CRA and the CRA doesn't owe me anything. That gets a little complex. Talk to your financial advisor and your bookkeeper or accountant about what that sweet spot is. But either way, we're investing $2,400 a month into the TFSA RSP combination. I'm going to be conservative in my illustration at a 4% rate of return. Now, the remaining 20% that's left over, $600, that goes into the IDF, or the Insured Deposit Fund. We're going to do this plan, as I mentioned, for 20 years. When you eventually retire, the tax dispositions on your income will only be attached to the RSP or RIF redemptions. Money, as I mentioned, money from the TFSAs becomes tax-free. Also, from the IDF, once we pull money from the Insured Deposit Fund, there are some tax benefits, and a lot of that can be tax-free as well. So your only tax dispositions at this point are coming from your RIFs or your RSPs. As I mentioned, the IDF provides a safety net, take a little more risk with the equity investments, but I'm still factoring in only a 4% rate of return. Now, I'm a bit of a math geek, so what Math Geek doesn't do a slide deck with an Excel spreadsheet planted into it. So I'm sorry, it's a little busy, a lot of numbers. I want you to focus on the bottom numbers, far right column. We're talking 21 years. Jill's been contributing to this $28,800 per year into the investments. This is the TFSAs and the RSPs. By year 21, there's $927,589 in this fund. Keep that in mind. Now, remember, I factored in a 4% rate of return, very conservative 4% rate of return into these two investment accounts. You do not need astronomical yields to retire comfortably. Here's mathematical proof. So don't go chasing crypto and pot stocks and whatever. A nice 4% rate of return will get you there. You don't have to take a lot of risk. Here's the IDF. Remember, we said $600 a month or $7,200 a year. Goes into the insured deposit fund. After 20 years, we have $202,000 worth of cash value. And oh, by the way, it's a life insurance policy. So God forbid, worst case scenario happen, and you pass away, your family or your charity or your loved ones receive the death benefit. After 20 years, there's $526,000. But let's look at this when you get to a point where you've decided you want to retire. And this just shows ages 55 to 65 for Jill. We're still talking about Jill here. We're not contributing any more money. So you can see it continues to grow. That compound interest continues to benefit you. We haven't contributed another dollar into it. But by the time we get to age 65, you decide, I want to retire. But guess what? The real estate market for equine operations isn't great right now. So I don't want to sell the farm. I don't have to sell the farm to provide retirement income because I've taken 10% of my gross revenue for the past 20 years and let it sit there for the next 10 years. And it's compounded and it's going to provide a tax advantaged income for me for life. So again, sorry, busy slide, but I'm a math geek and I love these numbers. So we look on the far left, we've got my Excel spreadsheet, and the year 33, we've got $1.4 million, and that's going to generate a yield of roughly $59,400 without eroding the capital. Every year, that investment account, whether it be TFSAs and RSPs or a combination of the two, is going to generate roughly $60,000 of income without eroding the 1.4 million. At the same time, the insured deposit fund is going to generate $23,000 of tax-free, tax-preferred, but in most cases, tax-free income from age 65 to 95 without eroding the capital. So we're still keeping a lot of capital on hand. Again, we haven't even sold the farm yet. So remember, this was funded for only 20 years using pennies on the dollar. So what does it look like in summary? Your total contributions over 20 years, $576,000 going into the TFSA RSP combination, $144,000 going into the insured deposit fund, a total of $720,000. In 20 years, you've contributed $720,000, taking very little risk, managing taxes appropriately. Remember, this was accomplished only using 10% of your gross revenue. So therefore, it should not be a huge burden on your current cash flow. And the total strategy benefit after paying you an income stream and uneroded capital is $4.3 million. Most of it tax-free, a lot of it tax sheltered, some embedded guarantees, very, very little risk. These are conversations I have with what I refer to as normal people, non-horse people, because we're a little bit abnormal as horse people. But these are conversations that aren't being had frequently enough in the horse industry. These are conversations that are happening with traditional business owners on how to set up your retirement plan. Now, something to take into consideration. We still haven't sold the farm. What if we sell the farm? What we also haven't taken into consideration is CPP and old age security. You've been working all these years, generally getting used to one source of income. That's your business income. In retirement, ideally, you have multiple income streams. In fact, the more the better for diversification, right? So you've got your TFSA, you've got your RSP, which would be converted to a RIF, a registered retirement income fund. You have your IDF, which we talked about. Then you sell the farm, you take those proceeds, put it into a non-registered investment portfolio that generates an income stream. Then you've also got your Canada pension plan. You've also got your old age security, which are your guaranteed Canada pensions. Now, the problem with your old age security, your OAS, is the government of Canada says, if you make too much money, we're going to take some of that or all of that away from you. And that's not an ideal scenario, right? The beautiful thing about the tax advantage solutions that we talked about today, TFSAs predominantly, IDF predominantly, is they do not trigger a tax disposition when you report your income. So you can still take money out of those vehicles, and it is not, or it may not in this case, trigger what's called an OAS clawback, meaning the government of Canada might say, you could keep all of that old age security because your only taxable income at this point is from your RSP RIFs or from the proceeds from the growth of the sale of your farm. So this is a very tax advantaged plan because, as you know, in Ontario, the biggest expense you will encounter as an Ontario resident, especially as a Ontario high income earner potentially, is taxes. That's your biggest expense. So if we can have a strategic plan to deal with those, we're going to be so much further ahead than we would if we didn't, right? So what does that mean for you? Well, it means success, right? Tax advantaged, early succession planning, financial planning, incorporate with all that with all that wonderful stuff that Joel was talking about. Man, now you're getting to where you want to be. So look, I want to summarize this. 10% goes a long way. And I'm hoping you've been hearing that all of your life. There's a local fella, I think from Cambridge, by the name of David Chilton, wrote a book called The Wealthy Barber. Came out a while ago. I think there's a sequel too. But I remember reading that a long time ago when I was a student at Guelph. In fact, he talked a lot about the golden rule of pay yourself the first 10%. And if you follow that principle correctly over a long period of time, you'll never experience a bad financial day for the rest of your life. I advise you to check out more of the Equine Guelph stuff on the horse portal. There's a bunch of stuff on there that I've done in the past. There's a bunch of other professionals that have talked about this stuff. I'd advise you to reach out to Joel. Like I said, he's got some really cool stuff if he invites you to do that, obviously. The resources are unbelievable for launching an equine-oriented business now that I wish were around 20, 30 years ago when I started. Thanks for having me. Thanks for investing your time with me. I really enjoy talking about money, math, and horses. And let me know if you have any questions.
Amazing presentation, Sean. Thank you so much. When starting a business, it's important to not only plan for the now, but to also think about how we are setting ourselves up for the future. Your insight on how to be more financially responsible is not only beneficial for those planning a business, but for all of us as we plan for our future. Sean will be joining us tomorrow night as a part of our industry professional discussion panel, so be sure to tune back in for that. There will now be an open Q&A session to ask questions to our wonderful speakers. Feel free to write your questions in the chat and I will read them out. We already have a few questions. So the first question is for Joel. The question says, aside from the benefits of going through the exercise of developing mission, vision, and value proposition statements, do you feel that simply having those at hand lends a level of confidence to potential customers?
I don't. The value proposition itself is usually, when done appropriately, can be easily translated into marketing and communication pieces. So if you looked at winbrook.com, you'll notice that it's a relatively new website, about a year old. Before publishing said website, we asked ourselves a bunch of questions. So what's important to us? How do we describe Winbrook now, the new Winbrook? How do we want to set a tone, right? Family, values, horse care, and so forth. All of the important stuff that was covered a while ago. So the mission and vision, I tend to hold those close to my heart. Those are not public documents necessarily. Those are really meant for you. They're meant to be your anchor, your cornerstone. They are meant to provide you with stability when there's a storm out there. And that doesn't mean you don't challenge them. That doesn't mean you don't modify and adjust and grow with that. But so that's how I would answer those. Some of them are private. Some of them can be translated into public.
Amazing. Thank you. That's really interesting. The next question is for Sean already. And the question reads, the idea of squirreling away 20% of income into a business account is fantastic, but often unrealistic. Often barn owners / managers are working on a just-in-time basis. Money coming in from lessons arrives just in time to pay for the load of hay being delivered. How can you really get people to do this, the squirreling away 20%, when the reality of bills is staring them in the face?
What a great question. And I think nothing is more current than that question. I'm not an active professional anymore. Things were a little bit easier 8 years ago when I ran Wellington. It was cheaper. The cost of living, cost of operating an equine operation right now is tough. I get it. I think you're right. It does sound unrealistic, but it's going to take some aggressive bookkeeping. It's going to take some aggressive budgeting. I don't love the idea of cutting too much, because cutting expenses tends to damage the value you're offering your clients, or the quality of your service. But what I will recommend, there's a couple resources, as I mentioned, on the equine portal. I talk a lot about how you need to increase fees, and you need to do it yesterday. We are just not charging enough. And look, I went through this at one point. At one point, I increased my board 50% overnight. I thought I was going to lose all my clients. What I did, in fact, was I held a barn party, had them all out, fed them, and kind of spoiled them, and talked about what our value proposition, as Joel was talking about, what value we offer our clients to justify the fee increase. I didn't lose a single client. Now, here's the other thing too. If you increase your fees 25%, and you lose 20% of your clients as a result, you just freed up 20% of your time to focus on the clients that stayed, to offer more value. You're now making more money per hour, right? So there's one way to look at it. You can look at cutting, yes. If there's something that can easily be cut, absolutely, take care of that. So budgeting is a big part of this, but I would advise you look at a way to increase your fees. Everyone else has increased their fees. I don't know what inflation on a bale of hay or a bag of shavings is in 2023, but I guarantee you it's exceeded 5-6%. Have you gone up 5-6% on your lesson fees, on your clipping fees, on your trailering fees, on your coaching fees, on your riding fees? Probably not. So yeah, tough call, tough thing to do. But I think you got to be a bit realistic on how you're pricing your services. And again, go back to making sure you are providing enough value, and that your clients see that value to justify those fee increases. I hope that helps, Molly.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think that's a really, really smart mindset and way of answering that question. So thank you. The next question is for Joel. And the question reads, how can owners / operators balance their time? Often they're so busy in the barn, taking care of the horses, giving lessons, training, etc. They don't have time to sit down and go over business plans, or meet with advisory committees, or consider business efficiencies. How important is this, and how can they make it happen?
I would suggest that the time equation is one that you need to master. It's one that you have to take control of. And there's really no negotiating on that front. At the end of the day, if you don't invest in the business, from a structural, from a thinking, from a planning perspective, then you will always be stuck in, I don't have enough time and I can't get things done and I just feel overwhelmed. And so for that state of feeling overwhelmed is a slippery slope. And it does require pulling back on occasion and spending time on the business and doing the business. The day-to-day equestrian business is not running a business. And if you don't run the business will run you. And that becomes challenging and uncomfortable and difficult. It doesn't have to be that way. I think you have to understand the business. You have to understand your clients, as Sean was saying. You have to understand your market. You have to try and get as much value out of those pieces as possible by providing even more value than you would have originally thought possible. And that's not always just working harder, more hours in the barn and coaching and so forth. Sometimes you need to step back and certainly here at Winbrook and what I do with my day job and balancing it with the farm and my family responsibilities and so forth, every brain needs oxygen. Every effort needs thinking of and planning for. You can't just do all the time. If you do all the time, then you have no idea if you're going up the wrong tree or not. You have no idea if you're headed in the right direction. So I would strongly urge that you find time. Pull back on something that is of relatively low value, find someone who is more suited for that type of work, and you focus on the bigger picture. You focus on the opportunities to provide value, create value. With the creation of value, you can think of what Sean was suggesting, increasing your prices and so forth. But if you're busy mucking, if you're busy feeding, if you're busy doing the day-to-day chores, then unfortunately, those wages are not quite as competitive as barn ownership, barn leadership, and so forth. So that's what I would suggest.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great answer. Thank you. I have another question for Sean. The question reads, how much income has your sample business owner, we talked about Jill, how much has she been receiving for her personal expenses, housing, food, transportation, etc., like that?
It's funny, when I was operating my farm, and I know I wasn't unique, it just sort of came out of the business account, you know, and obviously that's wrong. You have to pay yourself a salary. So in Jill's case, I had mentioned 21,000 was her operational expenses. That's part of that is her salary. Now, obviously, she's got to take a bit of a modest salary because she's, maybe she's a startup. She's a startup, and you got to sacrifice your own salary a little bit. But what I don't want Jill to do is sacrifice her succession and her retirement plan. Yeah, she might have to live on rice and beans for a little bit. That's we all did for a while, especially as we're building a business. My hope is that 30,000 revenue number that I made reference to continues to climb as Jill continues to grow the business. So yes, incorporated into that expense, that operational expense, is a salary for her as the chief operating officer or chief executive officer of her operation. And I want to expand a little bit on what Joel mentioned too. Look, I got caught in a 7-day-a-week cycle when I was operating, right? Mondays we took off because we horse showed all week. We needed to take Mondays off, so no clients were allowed. But I rode all the clients' horses on Monday just to make sure they were tuned up for the week. I needed to do that. Yes, that was part of the job that I needed to do. But I would have loved to take the time or prioritize the time to work on the business, not just in the business. And I really needed to do that. And I think everybody needs to do that. As Joel mentioned, you have to make the time. It's non-negotiable. So that coincides with, Jill operating her business. She needs to work on the business as much as she's working in the business. And that operational expense has her salary embedded into it. And she can increase her salary as it goes. So her own lifestyle is being covered within there. And that's why that 70% number is so hard to get to. But it's going to take some advisors to help you get there. I hope that helps.
I think that was a really, really great answer. Thank you. That explains the situation of paying yourself, being your own boss, but still allowing for your own salary. So appreciate that. The next question is for both of you or either of you. And it reads, where can one find business plans for horse operations? It seems people will not share how they run their business with you because they see you as the competition. So where can you get concrete business plan information to help you with factoring in all the costs? Either of you want to jump in on that one first?
Sure, I'll start and I want to talk about that competition side of things. I know there's competition in this business, but I remember a very big name trainer in Wellington once told me, there's a butt for every back. There's riders everywhere, and the industry is still growing. So don't be too consumed with your competition. The fact that nobody's willing to share their business planning with you, that's a bit of an insecurity on their part. But I think it's more likely they just don't have one that's quality enough to share with you. So where do they find one? Now I'm going to refer it on to Joel, because I bet you he's better suited to deal with a business plan template for the horse business. Take it away, Joel.
Yeah, it's a very good question. Certainly, when we started on the journey, I never asked a fellow barn owner for their business plan. I get the why of asking, but I would suggest the business plan framework in the equestrian industry is no different than the business plan framework in any industry. So there are a lot of business templates. You can go to Business Development Corporation, EDC. There's all kinds of public websites that have suggested frameworks. The costing of, right? I mean, when you start talking about budget and how to build a successful cash flow from an equestrian business, that requires time in saddle, if I can describe it as such. You need to get busy working in the industry, getting to know people in the industry, getting to know vendors and so forth. If somebody, somewhere, gets shavings at $7, I would tell you can get them for $5.50, but it requires a bit of a bulk order, it requires a bit of scale and so forth. And same thing with hay, same thing with just about every piece of investment or expense that you have to run into. But if you start relatively slow and small, I think it's a gentle path. It's a rather comfortable path, and you won't get knocked out by any single piece of the puzzle. But the template for business planning in the equestrian world is no different than any other one. And I think if you start with Sean's logic of that 70%, mine is 25%. So the margin is 25. If Sean's margin is 30, mine is 25, but I can afford that because I don't need his succession strategy. I've got my full-time job and I'm 50 some odd years old, right? So all that personal succession has already been dealt with. Hence why, as I said a while ago, I could have retired in a few years, but that has been delayed now just a little bit. So slow, start gentle, and get to know the cost structure. But that 25%, I would suggest, is a minimum, especially if you're owner operator. Like in our case, we're not owner operators, right? I don't teach lessons. I am not a horse person. I have not been on a single horse since we bought the place. So it's a very different model, and yet I want 25%. I just need more scale out of the business to achieve the 25%. And because there's a lot of fixed costs involved in a barn ownership structure. So that's what I would suggest. I would suggest you hunt down the 30% that Sean has described. You can do it as an owner operator, but you have to be relatively lean and you have to be focused on, as Sean suggested, the income side of the equation more heavily, especially early on, than the expense side. And once you've got the income side and you're providing sufficient value to your clients and they're not challenging, questioning, and so forth, and you've found your niche in the marketplace, then when the opportunity does appear, you can tighten up on some of the expenses as you see fit.
Amazing. Thank you both for really encompassing that answer really well. I've got another question for both of you, or for either of you, whichever one wants to tackle this one. The question says, how can young people, or anyone really, get into the equestrian business in today's climate when land prices and operating costs are so high? Do you guys have suggestions or creative strategies for that?
I would suggest that it's not so much about land. I wouldn't get stuck in real estate. Real estate can be part of the equation, but doesn't have to be part of the equation. One can be successful in this industry without the ownership piece of the puzzle. And, there's a young lady out of the GTA area that we met a couple of years ago, and we've been following on social media, and she just opened up her own business after working for other very high-end, well-known and well-respected barns as a coach, trainer, and so forth, and built a bit of a brand for herself. And now she's gone on her own, renting a facility and so forth. And so I would suggest that you hitch your wagon to a very successful colleague, to a very successful barn, to a very successful business framework, and that you earn that opportunity and you deliver on the expectation. And just like any career, right? It's about your ethics. It's about your work commitment. It's about delivering and being there with the right attitude and the right approach. And then opportunities show up. They do. If you're focused and you've got a sense of purpose again. And the framework I described a while ago isn't just for the big equestrian center. It can be for that single person who's building a coaching and a boarding team at a rented facility, or not at all, even just working for another facility and another coaching team. Building your brand, building what you stand for, and so forth is how you start. Because again, we're in the service industry. And service starts with you as that lead person.
What a great justification for my topic. right? Because typically, or how I grew up, or the trainers that I knew growing up, bought a big piece of land somewhere for a song, built an arena for peanuts, and built their equestrian business like that. I don't know if that's possible anymore. So now you factor in the idea that you create a succession plan and retirement plan decoupled from the idea that you have a big asset to sell in the form of real estate. So I never owned a farm. In fact, I operated on one of the nicest facilities on the planet at the Winter Equestrian Festival. That's where my farm was. So Joel is right. You've got to hitch your wagon to someone else that has substantial capital, and you can lease, rent, work for, have equity somehow into that without the huge capital requirement to buy a multi-million-dollar facility. It's too difficult right now in this climate. It's this, look, my wife's a real estate broker. I know all about the real estate market right now. It's difficult to get in that way. But the cool thing about the horse industry is you don't need to get into it that way. In fact, most of the trainers in Wellington couldn't afford buying Wellington, South Florida real estate. They couldn't. They lease properties and they operate their very successful businesses on it. There's no reason we can't do that in Ontario, and there's no reason we shouldn't do that in Ontario. And especially if you're still incorporating my retirement succession plan, you can do it without needing that real estate asset to provide for retirement income.
Thank you so much. Those were both really great answers to what will be our last question. We have run out of time for the Q&A. Thank you both so much for that. And thank you again to both Joel Lalonde and Sean Jones for giving their time and expertise to our event. And another thank you to our sponsors, Asira Insurance, Equine Guelph, SmartCert, The Rider, Schleza Saddlery, Canadian Horse Journals, and KX Radio for making tonight possible. Thank you to the students and the organizing committee. Also, a special thank you to Hilary Gregory at Ontario Equestrian. She is never seen by the audience, but she does a lot of crucial work behind the scenes, and we wouldn't be able to host the symposium without her. We encourage all of you to complete our brief feedback survey, which you can access via the QR code on the screen or by clicking the link available in the chat now. Those that do will be entered for a chance to win a saddle fitting gift certificate thanks to Schleza Saddlery and a gift certificate towards a SmartCert massage course. If you completed the survey last night, you can still be entered to win a second time. The survey will funnel you to a second set of questions. A reminder that the recording of each night of the Equine Industry Symposium will be available on the BBRM Equine Management YouTube channel. Be sure to tune back in tomorrow at 7 p.m. EST for our third and final night of the symposium. The final night will be a discussion panel facilitated by Dr. Kendrick Holder on buying into business fundamentals. A group of industry professionals, Bronwyn Wilton, Helen Richardson, Sean Jones, and Carl Lagerborg, will be discussing what makes a successful business from their perspective in the industry. If you have already registered, you're all set, but if not, there is still time to register. The QR code to register is on the screen and the link will be provided in the chat. Hope to see you all there. Have a wonderful night.